Welcome to the Jennifer J. Hammond Podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day. Jennifer is grateful for the opportunity to educate, empower, and inspire you with powerful conversations, insights, and new viewpoints. Here's your host, Jennifer J. Hammond.
Hello. This is Jennifer Hammond, and I have the amazing Jack Canfield right there. I am so excited. Let me tell you just a little bit about him, like as if you wouldn't know, but I want to make sure you have a little bit of some of the highlights of the amazing Jack Canfield. He is known as America's #1 success coach. He is also the co-author of more than 200 books, including the Success Principles, How to Get From Where You Are to Where You Want to Be, and also this one, the Success Principles Workbook, and of course, the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, which includes 40 New York Times bestsellers and has sold more than 500 million copies in 47 languages around the world. Jack is one of the featured teachers in the movie The Secret and has appeared on more than 1,000 radio and TV shows, including, of course, The Oprah Winfrey Show and Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, The Today Show, Fox and Friends, Larry King Live, and he's conducted live trainings for over 1 million people all over the world. He also, has set Guinness World titles and is a member of the National Speakers Association Hall of Fame. Did I get it right? Yay! So welcome, Jack.
Makes me feel very old when you read all that.
You've been very, very busy boy.
I have.
Well, one of the things with real estate investors, and so many of the people who are here today are new or relatively new in real estate investing. So I would love to start with your story of, really being able to move through rejection. And that's something that so often people just don't realize, that Chicken Soup for the Soul, although it is a household name around the world, most people don't realize how many times you were rejected and how many times people said that wasn't a good idea. Will you share that story?
Sure. Yeah. But I started out as a high school teacher, and I very quickly learned my students were really paying attention when I told them a story. When I was teaching historical facts or looking out the window, fidgeting, I'm telling them a story about my life or about something I read in Ebony magazine, because I taught in an all-black school, they were like on the edge of their seats. And so I very quickly learned that stories move people. And so I collected all these inspirational, motivational, overcoming obstacles kind of stories, which I put into this book, which we did not have a title for. And so basically we finally got a title, took it to New York to meet 21 publishers over 7 days. And everyone we went to, they go, we don't like the title. It's stupid. People don't buy short stories, collections of short stories. We're not going to publish your book. So in literally 3 days, 21 rejections. And so our agent gave us the book back and said, I can't sell this book. You're on your own. And then someone said, you should go to this book festival. All these publishers are there. We went from booth to booth to booth to booth, got a bunch of no's there. Anyway, long story short, 144 rejections. I actually found a file recently with about 80 of those letters in there saying, no, we're not going to publish your book. And 145th publisher said yes. So it took, I think it was about 16 or 18 months of rejections, 144 no's. And then finally, one little publisher in New York called Health Communications said, yes, we'll publish it. And we said, great, do we get an advance? They said, we don't do advances. I said, how many copies do you think you'll sell? They said, we'll be lucky to sell 20,000. We said, that's not our vision. Our vision is 150,000 by Christmas, because the book came out in July, and 1.5 million in a year and a half. He laughed at us out loud, as many people will laugh at you when you tell them what you're about to do. You're going to go for your dream. And but anyway, within a year and a half, we'd sold 1.3 million. He stopped laughing. And the next year he bought a Falcon 34 jet. I think I may have the number wrong, but has gold fixtures. I said one wing is called Jack Canfield. The other wing is called Mark Victor Hansen, my co-author.
And I think it's so important to know that because again, you were a teacher and you were in a kind of a rough area. It wasn't like it was the easy teaching job. And
Right.
yet you still realize that those stories are really so powerful. And as real estate investors, I think that's also really important because no matter what strategy you use, you need to know how to share your own story, but you also need to know how to listen to someone else's story. Would you agree?
I think listening is so important. And I think it doesn't matter what you're doing, you have to establish rapport with another person. And the way you do that best is by listening. There was a guy named Summers White who was he was one of the top people in the National Speakers Association when I was a nobody. And I finally I reached a certain rank called the Certified Speaking Professional. And I got to go to this cocktail party at the convention that I never got to go to before. And I walked in, and Summers, who was the youngest bank president in the history of America, now he was like probably 60 years old, comes up to me and he says, what's your name? What do you do? How do you do it? Where do you do it? But anyway, for 45 minutes, he interviewed me. I never found out anything about him. I remember calling my wife that night and I said, I met the most interesting man I've ever met. She said, really? I said, yeah. I said, I love this guy. She says, what do you do? And I went, I don't know. It's like, I had no idea other than he mentioned that he would, welcome me to this level that he was at, this new speaking designation. And so I think that, and I'm still telling a story, right? So, and this was like 40 years ago. So the reality is that when people are listened to, they feel important. And then you also learn a lot about them. One of the great questions I've learned from a man named Dan Sullivan, who runs the Strategic Coach Program, which you can use in any area of your life, but especially in real estate investing. One of the questions you ask someone is, if we were sitting here 3 years from now, what would have had to have happened for you to feel good about your progress, your success? And if they tell you, they've told you a whole lot of stuff about what they want to achieve and what they want to accomplish. And then you can show them how what you're doing will help them achieve that. If they're not willing to tell you anything, then they've kind of disqualified themselves for having a relationship because they're not going to be open, honest, and transparent with you. And so it's a really quick way to qualify if this relationship is going to work. And also, I remember I came home when I first learned that question, and my sister called me. And I asked her that question, and she talked for about 40 minutes. And at the end, she said, that's the best conversation we've ever had. And she did all the talking. And I learned a ton about her I didn't know. So listening is really, really important. And if you're in sales, when you can repeat back to people what they just told you as part of like what you now know they want and how you can help them get that, it's a done deal because you're speaking the language that they want to hear.
And also one of the things that I have learned as well, being a salesperson and with real estate investing especially, is being able to repeat back their words,
Yes.
not your interpretation or changing their words. Because
Right.
I've also changed it because I thought I was being helpful and realized that I've had more than one person bark at me and say, I didn't say that, and it was like one word I changed. And I realized no changing.
Right.
Very important.
Yeah.
Because words are defined differently for each person. And I find that fascinating how if you don't duplicate it very well, then they can actually get upset and feel like you didn't understand them. So I think that's really, really important in real estate investing. So one of the things that I know, this is the workbook, but the success principles, you have a beautiful story. And I would love if you would share this story about when your son asked you about success and you were trying to explain why you were so successful and you started looking at the different principles. Will you share that story with us?
Sure. The reason I wrote the book, The Success Principles, came out of a conversation with my son, who I think was probably 9, 10, 11 at the time. I don't remember exactly right now. And he said, we were sitting in bed I have a big king bed in my bedroom, and my wife was probably down in the kitchen. He was sitting there on his computer playing a video game, and I was doing probably emails or something. And he turned to me and he said, Dad, he said, how come our house is bigger than everyone's else's house I know? And I said, well, probably because we make more money, and I do, and therefore we can afford it. He said, well, why do you make more money than the rest of the people? And I said, well, I've been living my life by these set of principles that I call the success principles. And you want to hear a couple of them? And he said, yeah. And I started telling him some, and I probably went on a little too long, and he got a little bored, and he went back to his computer. But I was sitting there thinking like, wow, that is why I'm successful. And maybe I should put these in a book. And so I did. Here's the copy of the book that you don't have to hold up. It's called The Success Principles.
Yeah.
And this is a 10th anniversary edition because after 10 years, I rewrote it and added some new stuff to it, including like how to be successful in the digital age and, how to brand yourself and working with networking and things like that weren't in the first book. And so I just thought, well, how many principles do I actually live my life by? And I had about 114. Then I said, that's too many for a book. So I cut it down to about 60 and I started writing it. And it took me about a year and a half to write it. Probably took me 30 years to live it long enough to be able to write it. But then writing it itself took a little while. But the book, as you said, is now, well, this book's in, I think, 27 languages. It's in around the world, millions of copies sold. I was just learned recently that a town in Russia, the Russian mayor bought copies of the book in Russian for every major person in that town. The fire chief, the police chiefs, the board of directors of the town council, the nonprofit directors, the head of the hospital. And the whole town studied that book for a year, and the whole town transferred. Whoever knew that would happen? It's like you write a book and you have some idea of what's going to happen, and you never know.
And I think that's so, and again, I thank you for sharing that, because that's part of why I wanted to have you as part of this real estate investing summit, is because as real estate investors, they may not think, oh, Jack Canfield, the success principles. And yet, to me, these are the secret to being successful as a real estate investor. And I say secret only because if you already knew them, you'd probably apply them in your life, or maybe you wouldn't. But that's part of the reason that I wanted you to kind of talk through them, and especially the way that you weave in your stories. And so I'm going to start with one of my favorites, which of course is chapter 1. Go ahead.
Let me do a prologue before you do that.
Go ahead.
So I really want real estate investors, to get this. So I wrote a foreword to a book this last year. Book's out. You can get it. It's called Homeless to Billionaire, From Homeless to Billionaire. And it's written by a guy named Andres Pira, who is a person who lives in Phuket, Thailand. And at the age of 19, he arrived in Thailand from Sweden, where he was cold and didn't want to live there anymore. And he got $2,000 when his grandfather died and used it to buy a ticket and go to Thailand. And after a month, he was blowing all his money. He was living homeless on the beach, literally sleeping on the beach. His suitcase as his pillow and a beach towel under him, and a beach towel on top of him for a blanket. And no money. He's eating like ramen noodles every day, like 25 cents worth of noodles. And he emails a friend and he says, I have a problem. I'm homeless. I'm in Thailand. Would you send me $100? And the friend said, why would I send you $100? You were never that good of a friend. He said, but what I will do, he said, I will email you a book that I think will change your life. So he texted him, or, attached the book to an email, which he got on his cell phone. It was called The Secret, which is a movie I was in, and you mentioned it. And in The Secret, it teaches about visualizing what you want, having an affirmation, having a goal, all the things that are part of success principles. And he read it and he thought it was BS. He said, this is a bunch of crap. I don't believe it. But I got nothing better to do. So I'm going to prove it doesn't work by doing what it says, and then it won't work, and I'll know it's BS. So he started visualizing a cup of coffee, because he hadn't had coffee in weeks because he couldn't afford it. And he visualized how it would feel in his hand and the warmth of it. And he's going to swallow it. And he felt the warmth go down, the smell of the coffee, the flavor. And it was he really got into it. The next day, he's wakened up on the beach, the guy, pushing his shoulder like, yes, wake up. And this guy hands him a cup of coffee. He said, I run the ski mobile thing over there. I saw you've been sleeping on the beach the last few nights under this palm tree, and you look like you don't have any money, so I thought I'd buy you a cup of coffee. And he goes, oh my God, maybe this stuff does work. So then he visualized having a full meal. And by that, he meant a steak, baked potatoes, green beans, a salad, dessert, the whole deal. So 2 days later, not the next day, but 2 days later, he's walking down the beach, and the guy comes toward him, and he stops him, and he says, are you from Sweden? He says, yeah. Did you go to such and such high school? He goes, yeah. He says, what year did you graduate? He said, I graduated the year before you. I remember you. What's your name? He said, Andres Pira. He says, let me buy you lunch. So he goes and he buys him lunch and he eats the steak, the potato, the green beans, the whole deal. And he says, wow, amazing. So now he visualizes getting a job, and he ends up getting a job about a week later as someone who's going to herding people into his condo, where they sell you a timeshare, and or you could actually buy the condo. And he's just that guy that does that. And one day, now he's visualizing wanting to do what the salespeople do. They're making the real money. One day, one of the salespeople doesn't show up. Guy shows up. He says, I've only got about 5 hours. I want to buy a piece of property here. Is there a salesman? He says, well, they're all out, but I can take you and show you property if you're willing to be driving on a moped. So he gets on his moped, puts the guy in the back. They drive over to this property. He shows him. He says, I'll take it. Drives him back to the office. By then, the sales manager's there. They close the deal, and he says, you're really good. I'm going to make you a salesperson. So now he's a salesperson. Now he starts visualizing that he's going to become the sales manager. Within a year, he's a sales manager. Then he says the people making the real money are the ones that are building the building, so he starts building them. He then realizes that the real money is in the resort properties. He starts a contracting company. He builds resorts for Marriott and Radisson, and now he's worth $3 billion at the age of 35. 15 years from homeless to billionaire. And I say that because what he did was he read The Secret, did it, bought my book because he said, I liked you more than anyone else in The Secret, bought my book, The Success Principles, started applying those. And in his book called Homeless to Billionaire, he writes the 17 principles that changed my life and made me a billionaire. So I just wanted to give some relativeness to this works in the world of real estate before we jump into the stories.
Well, and I appreciate that because, again, I think that these really are the principles that can help someone be successful, because so often, as you know, they can have all sorts of other things. I can teach them the computer systems. I can teach them where to get the money. I can teach them where to find the deals. But if they don't actually believe it, if they can't visualize it themselves, if there's some other block, then all the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter.
Right.
So I'm so glad you shared that.
Talking about the mindset, which is critical.
Yeah.
Without the mindset, there's mindsets, there's skill sets, and there's action. And you're saying you can teach them the skill sets, but if they don't have the mindset that allow them to take the action, nothing ever happens.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So let's start. What I was trying to start with is in your book, The Success Principles, one of my favorites, and of course is the first one, is to take 100% responsibility. And so often, especially in, the markets go up, markets go down. And I've had so many people say, oh my gosh, why would you think real estate investing is it's a good time to be doing that right now? And it just made me laugh. Every time someone asks me that, it makes me laugh because it's always a good time. Always. There isn't a bad time, really, if you understand. There's always a new strategy. There's always a way to be more creative, whether you're a painter or a singer. With real estate, it's the same kind of thing. You're just painting a different kind of art. It's a different kind of it's art of a deal. You put all these different pieces together. Mm-hmm. And so, but most people, I find when they first get in, they're so in that blame mindset. Like right now, it's a health pandemic, or it's the economy, or it's I can't find money, or there are no deals out there. There's an interesting thing, and they won't take 100% responsibility. So will you talk about that principle, where it came from, and how people can apply it to real estate investing specifically?
Sure. Well, first of all, 100% responsibility. It literally is the kingpin. It's why it's the first chapter in every book I've ever written on success, is that if you don't take 100% responsibility, you feel like somehow the outside world is responsible for what you experience, which means at that moment, you're now in what we call victim consciousness. You are the victim at the effect of what's outside of you. And we know, and that in every economy, doesn't matter what the economy is doing, there are people who get wealthy. There are people who amass real estate because they're buying it when it's cheap. There are people who are selling it to people that are wanting to buy it. Like I live in Santa Barbara right now. A lot of people are moving out of LA because they don't see the value of living in a city anymore. Everything's shut down. It's too dense a population. They can't enjoy the restaurants. They can't enjoy the theater, the sports, athletics, etc. Why am I living in this place anymore? It's expensive. They can move to some place where a lot of people are retiring early. So there's a lot of that going on right now. There's a lot of my son lives in Brooklyn, and a lot of people are moving out, but it means all kinds of deals are now available in Brooklyn that didn't used to be available before. It's going to come back. We don't know when. Is this a good time to get in? What can you do with it? Can you rehab it? Can you all kinds of things, you make condos out of it? Who knows? But the point is that there's always something going on that can happen. You're not the victim of it. I teach this formula called E plus R equals O. There's an event, you have a response to that event that produces an outcome. And so what happens is the event just is, the pandemic just is, the economic downturn just is, whoever gets elected president in 2020 just is. All of that just is. It's our response to it that produces the outcome. Two brothers that are twins, one becomes a millionaire, another becomes an alcoholic. Why? The DNA was all the same. Everything was the same. Different choices, different responses to the same environment, same whatever. So what are the three things we can control? We can control our thoughts, we can control our images, and we can control our behaviors, which includes what we say and what we do, what we don't say and what we don't do, which is also equally important. So what happens is, most of us, when we don't get what we want, we blame the event. We blame the government. The Republicans are blaming the Democrats are blaming the Republicans. Everyone's blaming the people who don't vote. We could go down the list of what we blame: the weather, the traffic, the economy, the Chinese, the immigrants, whatever. So blaming is a response to an event that does not produce a better outcome. Complaining is a response that does not produce a better outcome. So we have to look back and say, everything I'm now experiencing is a result of a choice I made in the past. So if someone gave me $1,000 and I went to Vegas or Atlantic City and blew it, then what happens is my net worth did not go up. If instead I put that into a savings account and 5 years later made that an investment in a property, or got together with some other people into a real estate investment trust and invested in a property, then I have a different outcome than the guy who went to Vegas, or the guy who bought a new sweater, or the guy who bought a new suit, or whatever. So different, same event, $1,000, treated it differently. I was up in, where was I? In Massachusetts? No, New Hampshire. And I was doing a seminar for a bunch of franchise real estate owners. And this was during this was the recession, 2008, 2009. Everyone was down about 30, 40%. You may remember that time. Oh, and what happened was this one guy was not. And everyone said, oh yeah, he's doing really well. So I said, come up to the front of the room. I want to ask you, what are you doing differently? And he said, well, it's how they think. I said, what do you mean? He said, they all think when there's a recession, they've got to cut back and they're going to do less well. So they do. He said, my belief is no matter what the economy does, I always do well. And he said that I act on that and then I do well. We know that when you start cutting back on advertising, you start cutting back on investing, you start cutting back on education, et cetera, you tend to have better results. And so the reality is the people who start to think in what I call poverty consciousness start producing poverty. People thinking in abundance consciousness start producing abundance. So we have to give up blaming, give up excuse making, and give up complaining. And then say, okay, whatever you're experiencing, say, how did I create that, or how did I promote that, or how did I allow that to happen? Because it's one of those three. And the good news about that, and a lot of people don't want to because they think, now I have to take responsibility, I'm bad. It's like I'm to blame. No, it's to say, if I created it, I have the ability to uncreate it and recreate it in a way that works for me. If I didn't create it, I don't have any power. And so that's the value of taking 100% responsibility. And notice it's 100%. One of my favorite little examples, and I know you like this, is I will say, how would you like to be married to someone who is 99% committed to monogamy? and nobody says yes. You want 100%, because every day you'd be wondering, is today the day? But 99%, that's 3.5 days a year. I got to worry, So basically 100% commitment. And once you've made a commitment, 100%, then it's over. If I decide I'm going to go run, and every day I have to decide if I'm going to get out of bed. Well, it's raining today. It's too hot today. It's cold today. The winds are there today. I stayed up too late last night. Every day there's an argument in my head. If I decide 100% commitment, I'm going to run no matter what, then I don't have that argument anymore. It's over. I just get up and do it. I don't argue about, am I going to brush my teeth today? Am I going to floss my teeth? Am I going to eat breakfast? It's just called, that decision's handled, and that frees up a lot of energy for being creative and making money and doing the other things that people want to do.
Exactly. And I definitely think that's one of the things that so often people use that as a stumbling block, and just they just don't want to take that step and make that decision. And speaking of decisions, one of the other big things about real estate investing that is so key, and then of course is in your book as well, is about setting goals. So as a real estate investor, whether this is their very first time or whether they've done it a few times and they're starting to get to that next level, this is when it's really important to create goals. And one of my favorite stories that you share, and I'd love if you share, is about you were teaching about setting goals and visualization and things like that, about having a house in Hawaii, and then all of a sudden you manifested it. Will you share about that?
Sure. That's called accidental success. It was kind of intentional, but not really. I'll explain it. So one of the things I do is I teach the importance of affirmations and visualization. And if you affirm something as if it's already happened. So I am happily celebrating watching the sunset from the lanai of my condo in Ka'anapali Bay. So I'm saying right now, let's say I wanted a condo in Hawaii on Ka'anapali Bay, and I don't have it yet, but I want to affirm that I have it, because what it does, it actually programs my subconscious to come up with solutions to actually make it happen. Every time I affirm it and visualize it, it actually activates the law of attraction, which I know for a lot of people is kind of strange, but it basically everything is energy and frequency, and that we know that from quantum physics. And so my thoughts actually set up a frequency that then attracts things to me that will match that frequency. And it also programs my subconscious to come up with solutions to make that thing happen. I won't try to go into all the psychology of that, but there's all studies on it. So now what happens is I'm going to give a talk to a company where they wanted me to give 3 talks a day to 3 different groups, 2 hours in the morning and then 2 hours in the afternoon, like, 1 to 3, 3 to 5 in the morning from, 9 to 11. So I'm going to be there for a week. So I'm going to give 15 talks. And I have in my talks, I always talk about affirmations and visualization. I show pictures of, like, if I wanted this car, I had an affirmation. I'm happily driving my new Lexus LS 400 down the Pacific Coast Highway. I have a picture of a Lexus. I have a picture of me standing in front of a Lexus that I went and took at the dealership, before I even owned the car, that kind of thing. And so I just wanted some new slides. I was bored with the old one. So I wrote down, I'm so happy and grateful that I'm watching the sunset over Ka'anapali Bay from the lanai of my condo in Hawaii. And I just put that on the slide. I found a picture of a sunset over Ka'anapali Bay, which is easy to do online in Google Images. And that was now in my slideshow. So every day, 3 times a day, I'm sharing the slide and saying those words. About a year later, and I kept it in my slideshow. Now when I'm doing, twice a week or something, it was still there. So about a year later, this friend of mine calls me and says, we just built a house in Hawaii, and we had 3 partners go in. We were going to develop it to sell it. We put about $8 million into it. We're going to sell it for $15 million. It's on a 350 feet of oceanfront in Maui, in Ka'anapali. And one of the people wants out. Would you be willing to buy their share? And I said, how much is it? And it was a couple $1 million. And I said, sure, let's do it. So now I'm at this house, and the room I liked was the house was like a kind of an L shape, big master bedroom up here, living room and a kitchen and dining room and infinity pool and all this stuff here. And then a long hallway with about 5 master bedroom suites downstairs and 3 upstairs. So it was like 9 bedrooms. Each bedroom had a walk-in closet, glass showers, marble floors, wood. And everyone had a whole wall of glass where it went into the wall, so you were outside, inside with a balcony. And one night, I liked the one at the very end, and it had a nice balcony. I'm sitting out there, and the sunset setting, and I went, holy shit. I am sitting here on the balcony watching the sunset over Ka'anapali Bay. Mission accomplished. I didn't even really want it, but it manifested. And I could tell you 10 other stories. I could tell you 10 other stories like that, where just by visualizing, I manifested $1 million check from a publisher that way. I manifested a publisher that way. So the house I live in now, which is 6,500 square feet on 3 acres of land with a swimming pool and a stable and corral, cabana, office space, amazing place. And that was manifested. I started visualizing that long before I even saw it or could afford it. So it works.
And it does, and it's so special. And I love when you share your stories, because it also helps people understand that, again, you started as a teacher. It wasn't like somebody handed you $1 million and said, okay, go start and be a real estate investor. You really learned these principles and applied them and became successful. So Jack, thank you a million times over. Thanks for sharing your gifts with us today.
Hi, I'm Jack Canfield. You may know me as the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And if you want more help in getting from where you are to where you want to be, I want to encourage you to listen to the Jennifer Hammond Show.